And now, The Rock Newman Show.
Folks, welcome back to The Rock Newman Show. Today, Saturday, November the 23rd, 2013. Don't forget, coming up in our next hour, a gentleman who aspires to be the next mayor of Washington, D.C., the owner of Busboys and Poets, Andy Shalal. That will be a very interesting hour. As we wrap up this particular segment of the 10 o'clock hour, joining me now are Jeffrey Lee and Tina Lee. You see the beautiful photo on the screen of Brandon Carrington Lee. Today is the 10th anniversary of Brandon Carrington Lee's transition. Brandon left this world, he left this sphere 10 years ago today, a victim, if that's the right word. I understand he was such an ebullient spirit of a rare form of bone cancer, osteosarcoma. And I must tell you that until I became aware of Brandon's plight and the great work that you guys are doing with his foundation, I had never heard of that term. First of all, welcome to the Rock Newman Show to you both. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You know, if I can go back before we get into sort of the technical of, this dreaded yet rare disease. Brandon was born when?
Brandon was born September 18th, 1989.
Okay, all right. Now, were there any early signs of trouble with him, or at what point, how old was he when he was diagnosed?
He was 12 when he was diagnosed.
Oh, wow. So
12 years old.
Now, had he had like some problems that gave that indication? Because I know he was quite the sportsman.
He was.
If it was round, he wanted to play with it, or oblong also.
Didn't matter.
I saw him in his football uniform, handsome as could be.
Yeah. No, it was interesting. We'd go to bed at night, and Brandon would come in the room saying his knee was sore or it was warm to the touch. And he would come in night after night, and we'd look at it, and it would just be warm. And in the morning, he wouldn't have any problem. He would just get up and go to school like nothing was the problem. But at night, for some reason at night, it would inflame, and he would come in and complain about his knee being sore. So eventually we took him to a doctor, orthopedic surgeon that we know, and he looked at it, he took some x-rays, and he referred us, after the x-rays, he referred us down to Washington Hospital Center at the beginning to get some more extensive testing done. And it was at that time when they took a bone biopsy, and it was at that time we found out that he had cancer.
Yeah. That has to be, I think, Jeff and Tina, part of what so drew me to this subject is my experience with a couple of nieces and nephews that I have that we lost for anywhere from, one of them was 6 years old up to 14 years old also, my nephew PJ from cystic fibrosis. So the first acknowledgement of that kind of seriousness, what kind of reaction did you guys, how did you feel, and what kind of reaction did you have?
Well, initially, and like you said, Brandon played a lot of sports. And at that time, he had so many teammates on his basketball team that were going through Osgood-Schlatter, the growing pains disease.
Sure.
So even when we took him to the orthopedist, it's one of those things, like we said, his turn. This is what it is.
Sure.
And initially, that was the thought. So even when they said he had a tumor, cancer didn't register. It was like, oh, okay, well, so we're going to go down to Washington Hospital Center. We met the surgeon. We're going to get rid of this thing and move on. So it was kind of like, oh, cancer. Because I even remember we were sitting in the cancer center, and Brandon said, well, why are we here? And I said, oh, well, this is just where the surgeon is, know. So it really didn't register until we heard that. But even still, it was one of those things where Okay, so we go through what we have to go through.
Right.
We move on.
Yeah, get rid of this.
You know,
right. That's just another-
and it never really, I mean, you know, terminal was always a possibility, but for me, and you know, Jeff's reaction, I'd never really felt it during that 2 years of treatment until we got to the end. Because even when he was diagnosed, he was multifocal, which means multifocal, which means he presented in more than one spot. It actually turned out that he had it in his tibia, fibia,
In this
pelvic section,
Right.
and a soft spot in the lung that took a while before it actually grew.
Right.
So, you know, they weren't even sure if that's really what it was. So
Sure.
all the other spots were treated.
Right.
But after everything else was treated, the lung took off.
Jeff,
Yes.
as the man of the family, you know, papas just fix stuff. They make stuff right. They don't let nothing happen. And I know you one of those kind of man's man. How did you feel?
Well, you hit the nail right on the head. It was absolutely that mode that I moved into. Because as Tina said, we went to the doctor and we didn't know, nobody had said the word cancer to us. The appointment just happened to be in the cancer center. We're not crazy, we understand it, but it wasn't until one of the nurses came to us and started presenting us with all these options of how you can pay for this and what services you can get and so forth. And we were like, wait a minute, what is this all about? And we finally heard the word cancer. And so I did exactly as you said. I went into what I call man mode. My job is to resolve. As the father, as the husband, as the head of the household, my main responsibility is to protect my family in all areas. So that's where I initially went was, okay, I got this. I was blessed to have the resources and the time to do anything and everything. And we did that. We went to Houston, Texas, to MD Anderson. We went to Minneapolis, the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota. We sent his records around the world to anybody and everybody that we knew someone to see if there were any protocols or any other new techniques that could be used for this service. And I mean his disease. And so that's the mode I was in, and constantly in that mode. And then there's the maintenance of what's going on through the treatments and everything. And Tina was really the one who handled the maintenance part of this, all of the appointments, all of the medications, all of the different discussions and everything that we had to have with doctors and everyone. And my role was making sure everything was all right. I told Brandon, as we went through the treatment, that you won't go through this alone, and we will go through this as a family. And when he would have to go into the hospital for chemo treatments and so forth, that he never spent a night by himself in the hospital. It was Tina and I would rotate because we have another son, Jeffrey, who was in school at the time, and Tina would spend the night at the hospital with Brandon. And I would go home, and then in the evening, I would pick Jeffrey up from school, and he and I would go to the hospital, and we spend the evening there as a family at the hospital. And then Tina would get to go home for the night. Right. So she and Jeffrey would go home for the night, and I would spend the night at the hospital. But that was what drew us to, after all had happened, to want to give something back. We were blessed and are extremely blessed and had the wherewithal to go through cancer as a family. Because when a child has cancer, I mean, the whole family is involved in this. And so we would be at the hospital sometime with Brandon, and his needs would be there, and we would be there for him. But there were other kids in other rooms on the ward that had no one. We became friends with a lady who had a daughter in the room next to us who had cancer, but she had kids at home, and she was a single mother. And cancer treatment, like a lot of other treatments, is more than what just the doctor gives you. There's all kinds of things, from spiritual to just maintenance issues, and the staffs at the hospital aren't there enough in numbers to take care of everything. I mean, if you've ever been around somebody who's been really sick, sometimes they just want you to rub their back. They just say, "Can you rub my back?" And if nobody's there to rub your back, it's not all the cancer drugs in the world and all the whatever they had can't do what a back rub can do for someone. So we've done with our foundation is trying to create a pediatric palliative care unit down at Georgetown University Hospital where Brandon was treated. And it was because we saw the need and the absolute need from the patient standpoint for a palliative care program, which is an all-encompassed program. It's not just what the doctors are doing.
Sure.
The thing that I said earlier about Brandon never spending a night alone in the hospital, it was very important because as just the fact of having to, I need to go to the bathroom, and the nurse is in another room with somebody else. Sure. And we've all experienced being in the hospital, pushing the button. But just to talk to somebody in the middle of the night, just to, again, like I said, can you rub my back? All of those things mean so much to patients who are going through these kinds of diseases and treatments. So we were very fortunate and had the ability to be there and do that, and we just want to pass that along. So that's what our foundation is really doing. We do a couple of things. We're doing some research into the disease that Brandon fought. We're doing education. We give scholarships to kids who want to go to school to be in the medical field. We also do a little part of our scholarships to kids who want to architect. Because Brandon wanted to be an architect when he grew up. So those are the things that we do. And as we came on here and you said this is the 10th anniversary of Brandon's transition, we prefer to look at it as the 10th anniversary of the 14. Because we look at it as we were given 14 years. And so we celebrate those that we got.
And oh my God, he lives. I mean, through what you all are doing and through the memory and doing some, reading some of the materials, it appears as if, especially, I don't know before, but especially after the diagnosis, that Brandon grew into a certain spirituality.
Wow.
And he embraced that in a big way. Can you tell us about that?
I think the whole family grew into a spirituality because of Brandon. I think, Jeff, you'll probably speak a little bit more about Brandon personally in that regard, but one of the things that I realized that this was a lot larger than us. I mean, Jeff had mentioned that we went to the Mayo Clinic and different places, but I remember there was one afternoon we were waiting for Brandon's treatment, and he was just like so uncomfortable, and this was a cyberknife treatment that he was having done. And he just couldn't relax, so his appointment time had to be pushed down. We were sitting in the waiting room, and a lady came in with her daughter for treatment. And she kept looking at the scar on Brandon's leg because he had had limb sparing surgery. Basically, the bone was removed from mid-thigh to almost down by his ankle to remove the tumors. And he was fitted with it's not really a prosthesis, it's a
titanium
rod, which it was. And so the lady saw Brandon's scar, and I know she kept looking at him, but it was like, and Brandon was so used to it, he just kind of zoned out.
Sure.
So eventually she made her way over and she said, does your son have osteosarcoma?
Right.
I said, yeah. I've never seen anybody get so excited about having osteosarcoma because she said, we do too, my daughter does too.
Oh, wow.
Well, as we go through the conversation, we realize that she's there because we had gone to the Mayo Clinic and she had met with a doctor at the Mayo Clinic who said, this boy came in here who had the cyberknife treatment, and it was done down at Georgetown Hospital. And she had tried, there were only at that time a few hospitals in the country, basically, that had the cyberknife treatment.
And cyberknife treatment, what is that?
Cyberknife is a precise radiation. If you think about radiation in terms of cancer treatment, it's precise radiation that targets the area right where the tumor is, so that the other cells and the other areas of tissue of the body is not affected by the radiation. She got there because she had gone to the Mayo Clinic and met with the same doctor who we had, and he said, don't know whether or not you can get in there, but this is where this boy was, and these were his doctors and all of that. She had tried every other cyberknife facility in the country and was rejected because she wanted her daughter to be treated as a pediatric case.
Yeah.
At that time, her daughter was 24, and no one else would treat her as a pediatric case until she got to Georgetown.
Saying someone totally unknown.
And that's
And
when I
there-
realized
yeah,
this
there's something-
was a lot
there's
larger
something
than us
connecting
in
it up,
terms
something-
of our travels and and all of that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it just showed in a specific way in our lives how good God is,
Yeah.
though.
Yeah.
Because I belonged to a men's fellowship group at the time, and
Sure.
I was going every week to the men's fellowship group, and we would sit in the circle, and some of the brothers would say things about, why was I there?
Yeah.
I remember vividly one night, one brother said to me, he said, I don't understand why you're here. He said, we're dealing with life-sustaining issues,
Sure.
getting by every day. He said, you don't have those issues.
Right.
He said, why are you here?
Yeah.
And I said, that's a good question. I said, I don't really know the answer. I said, but I think is that God is preparing me for something.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm just taking where he's leading me. So I'm being prepared for something.
Yeah.
And this was before Brandon's diagnosis.
Right.
And so as I look back in retrospect, that was where I was being hardened for the journey
Yeah.
ahead.
Yeah.
And the family as a whole.
And you all had a profound and real experience that you might not see the face of God, but you sure see the work. You sure
see-
We
feel,
see it,
feel
we
the
feel
spirit.
it, we live it.
I mean, it's something that Brandon said to me. We came home one day. We had been down in South Carolina on vacation. And we actually got the call while we were down in South Carolina. The doctor called. We had taken Brandon to the doctor just before we went on vacation, and they did some tests, and they called us and they said, unfortunately, the cancer has begun to spread to his lung. And that's what they had always told us from the beginning, that once it got in the lung, in the soft tissue there was really next to nothing that could be done about it.
Jeff, we want to finish that point. We're going to go to a break and come back and pick it up. Folks, Jeff and Tina Lee, they are heading up, along with their son, the Brandon Carrington Lee Foundation. It is something that you need to be aware of. It is one incredible story and needs your support. We'll be back in just a moment after these messages. Hello to all my friends in the DMV. I am Rock Newman from the Rock Newman Show. I want to tell you about the MGM Grand National Harbor, the most exciting project to come to the District, Maryland, or Virginia in quite some time. You're going to have great fun. Come on down, support this project with all you have. It is going to be wonderful for the area. We're going to increase our tax base. We're going to get funding for the police department, for ambulance, for fire, for education. It is really a project that is going to benefit our area. Folks, we want to support in a very strong DMV kind of way this great project from the MGM Grand National Harbor.
And now, The Rock Newman Show.
Folks, welcome back to the Rock Newman Show today, November the 23rd, and it's Saturday, November the 23rd, 2013. As you saw earlier, we dedicated today's show to Brandon Carrington Lee, who left us 10 years ago today when he was 14 years old. And as his dad so aptly says, it's simply the anniversary of a great 14 years that they had with him. Let me ask you, when Brandon was diagnosed, and it was very clear that this was something very serious, how did he react to it?
It was just another day to Brandon. I tell the story sometimes when we were driving home from the hospital, from Washington Hospital Center when we first got the diagnosis. And Tina and I were sitting in front, Brandon was sitting in the back seat, and I said to him, do you know the Lord's Prayer? And he said, yeah. He just whipped it off for me real quick, ripped it off for me.
Sure.
And I use that time as an example. I said, when I'm trying to be the best me I can be, sometimes when I'm driving and people at a stoplight, and the people in front of me, the light turns green and they don't move, and I'm on the horn and so forth and so on, and I'm like, I remember being that person that did not move because my mind was 1,000 miles away from driving. I didn't see the green light, people were blowing the horn at me, so I learned in that moment that, you never know what that person is somebody's going through. So it sort of helps me in my walk now. But Brandon did everything. The surgeon, I remember when the surgeon sat down with Brandon and said, okay, he basically drew a line on his leg and showed him that he would cut from his mid-thigh down to his ankle and then take all of that bone out and replace it with a prosthetic, with the titanium rod.
Right.
And then Brandon was like, okay. And then he said, well, what will I be able to do? Well, the doctor said, well, unfortunately, you won't be able to ride a bike. You won't be able to roller skate. You won't be able to do some of the things you've been able to do. Basketball. Brandon rode his bike. He roller skated. He played basketball. He did everything the doctor said he could not do. Because that was his spirit. This thing does not stop me.
He continued to live.
He continued to live. And that's what I say. I tell people all the time, we lived with cancer for 2 years.
Right.
And that's how we approached it. Okay, this is what the hand we've been dealt.
Right.
Let's deal with it. And Brandon was the personification of that. He got up every morning. He even took over his treatment. Where at some point they put a port in his chest where they could draw, since they had to draw so many fluids and everything, blood tests and everything, where they actually put a port in his chest that stayed there permanently. And it had to be cleaned daily and rewrapped and everything else. And we would go in and put the gloves on and do all of the work. And it got to the point where Brandon was like, yeah, look, stop, y'all move, give me the gloves, give me the gloves. He would do
Let
all
me handle this.
I got this, I got this.
Right.
One of my great stories about it though, Rock, Brandon played basketball, and I'll let Tina tell the best story, but we went to Hawaii once with the kids' basketball team. And Brandon was in treatment at the time, and he could not play on his team. So his team went, and we all went to Hawaii. And at the very end of one of the games, the coach came to me and said, can I put him in? Can I just put him in? It's like 5 seconds left in the game. And he still had his port in his chest and everything else, and he could not have any contact. I said, look, Brandon wanted it so bad. So I said, look, this is what we'll do. Put him in the game, set him on the other side of the court, run the play to the other side of the court. And so there would be no reason for anybody to come near Brandon. And the coach said, okay. And so we explained to Brandon what we were going to do. We told the whole team what we were going to do. And so Brandon got to go out on the court for the last play. Well, but Brandon's little buddies had another idea. They had another idea. They took the ball out
have mercy.
and threw the ball right to Brandon. And everybody on the court came rushing toward Brandon. And we're sitting in the stands going, oh, my God, oh, my God.
Lord. Yes, Lord.
And so he eventually passed it back to another one of his teammates, and the clock ran out. But that was Brandon.
Yeah.
And then another time we were in treatment, And I'll let Tina tell you the story because it is just so
Okay.
amazing.
One of those Disney moments.
Yeah.
One of those what?
Disney moments.
Okay.
I mean, you know,
Okay.
we actually saw the movie flash before us. Brandon scheduled with his oncologist, like, look, my team is in the playoff. He played AAU ball. He said, my team is in the playoff. And, you know, we ranked 7th in the country the last time, so we're scheduled for a tournament in Virginia Beach, and I got to be there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, look, let's move this treatment up so I can get on down the road. And, you know, we're like,
Brandon was focusing on important things.
That's right,
I mean,
that's
he
right.
was, you
That's
know.
right.
And so he literally had just gotten out the hospital that morning, and they had a big tournament down in Virginia Beach. And after chemo, I mean, you're weak,
Yeah,
you're tired,
yeah.
you're sick. It didn't matter. Brandon had everything he needed in the car to make the trip. The team was down there playing. We got there close to halftime. We walk in the door, and they're down by like 23 points or something. I mean, they're getting beat. And Brandon started putting on his uniform in the car just so he could be on the bench with his buddies. And walk in, they're down by like 23 points. And it's like everything went in slow motion. We walk in the door, the team turns around, and everybody's like, Brandon's here, Brandon's here. He can barely walk good.
Yeah.
And the other team is looking like, who's this Brandon cat? What's the big deal? Well, they came back after halftime. They went on to win the game by like 20-some points. I mean, it was just, the second half was a complete turnaround. And it was just one of those magical moments that you sit there like, wow.
Yes,
You
sir.
know, you know.
What a story.
Yeah.
That's a movie. My
It
God.
was. It
My
really
God,
was,
that is an uplifting movie.
Yeah.
You know, sort of the spirits in the house.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's also, our story is a story of family.
Yeah.
Where we had a community that was all around and always there. And so not only did we go through it as a family, we had a community that supported us and a church that supported us and all of that. And that's why, once again, the palliative care program that we're trying to put together is so important, because it is a group of people that are needed when somebody is going through something like this.
Sure.
And how we survive it and how we've survived it. And it's gone on, like I said, 10 years now, and it's something that everybody whose life he ever touched, and some he never touched because it's spreading out from everybody, has been affected by it. And it just accentuates what Brandon said to me after we got back from that vacation that day when we found out that his cancer had spread. I got a little filled up and walked out on the back porch, and he came out on the porch, just the two of us out there, and he said to me, he said, Daddy, and he said, even if I die, it doesn't mean God didn't heal me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's where his focus was.
Yeah. Folks, you know, the first day that we did this show back February 23rd, 2013, we started our broadcast by saying that we were not going to pretend to just sit here and that we didn't have an agenda. And we have an agenda that we have no apologies for, that we would like for what we do from this table and from these microphones to make a difference in the world, to make the world a little better place, one conversation at a time. And I want to tell you, and Jeff and Tina both have mentioned this, there is a foundation. It is called the BCLFoundation.org. B as in boy, C as in Carrington, L as in Lee, Brandon Carrington Lee Foundation.org, but BCL.org. And if ever I've come in contact with some committed individuals to make a difference in people's lives using the incredible and inspiring example of their son, it is this organization. And to the extent that anyone out there cares anything about what I have to say, I would say take a look at this, become aware of it, share the information. You never ever know when it might hit home to you. Jeff and Tina have told an incredible story about having been blessed to have the wherewithal to actually be able to provide their son
with the very best of care, the very best of support. But the reality is, more than not, don't have that ability. And so therefore, they need support. They need palliative care, caring, which is, again, that village to raise a child kind of situation. So truly, I would urge and encourage you all to take a look at the foundation. If you're so inspired or at all available and able to do so, support this very, very worthy cause. Now, I've had family and others close to me die from cancer. And I've felt a sense of anger. You know, when I see the priorities of our country, of our government, and the wars and the waste and the, I don't know if going into space is helping. I don't know. I'm just seeing billions and billions of dollars spent. And I'm seeing families, brought to their knees and decimated. The priority, where needs to be the priority?
Well, let me answer that two ways, Rock. One is tied into how do you keep away from the anger when something like this happens, because the priorities seem to be skewed. Let me walk a different path with you for a moment, because my goal, as we stated earlier, my job was to protect and to make sure nothing happened to my family and everything. And so it even went into my prayer, into my spiritual and my prayer, and I was asking God to heal Brandon, and so that we could continue on. And I was talking to my brother about this one day, and he said to me, when you pray, what do you ask for? I said, I asked for God to heal Brandon and everything. And he said, really? I said, yes, that's what I asked for. He said, have you ever thought about just asking God to let his will be done, and that you would accept whatever his will was?
It's a big one there.
It was, but it was so freeing, because see, it allowed me to let go and let God. And so on one level of it, from a spiritual standpoint, it was so freeing to me to now pray to God, do you, and I'll be me. Let God be God. So what's going to happen is that, and his blessings will flow even beyond what I was asking for. See, 10 years later, we're still pushing the foundation and doing the things. Right. That is something that wasn't going on prior to. So I never know what God's will was. So what God's will may be for us to be here on this show today, for some one person to hear our voice today, that can affect what is going on with government and priorities of spending, because it is not one of the sexy cancers, as they say. Sure. It is not one that has millions of deaths a year, but one is too many if it's your one.
Of course.
And so there is no space or place for the anger, because we let God lead this journey for us. And so we just do what we're called to do and let him do what he does.
Your other son, Jeffrey.
Yes.
How has this affected him, and how did he handle all of it, and what's he doing now?
Well, Jeffrey, as Jeff said, when we were coming home from the hospital and we had received the diagnosis, one of the things we did, Brandon told Jeffrey, because I think it's a whole different thing if we had come in and said, this is what's going on with Brandon and everything. But for Brandon to tell Jeffrey, send a couple of messages. One, it told all of us that Brandon understood, what the diagnosis was. Sure. But also, Jeffrey saw that, okay, well, Brandon's ready for this. He's cool with it. So I'm going to roll right along with him. But he was the big brother. He did, and still to this day, because he's president of the foundation.
Yes.
So to this day, Jeffrey is right there along with us. And he's already been tweeting and sending everything out. And, today's Tea Day, everybody. Yeah. Okay, and he keeps up Brandon's Facebook page also.
Okay.
So.
You know what? If you would just tell quickly in the last sort of minute or so we have here, with this being the anniversary, the thing that you all do is you have tea on each anniversary.
Right. Today is our stay-at-home tea day, and we send, as part of our anniversary celebration, I guess you can call it. We send out a packet to everybody on our mailing list, everybody who's supported the foundation, everybody who's asked to be a part of, our events and updates and everything. We send out a packet and ask them, take time, sit back and have a cup of tea in memory of Brandon. But we've extended it not just in memory of Brandon, because there's so many others who have loved ones who have passed on. And it's so important for us to just take some time, sit back, relax, and be still.
Just be still.
Folks, we have two wonderful guests, Tina Lee and Jeff Lee. And this boy right here is in the house. This boy right here is very much in the house, and our special guest today also. Thank you so much for joining us here
Thank
at the
you,
Rock
Brian.
Newman Show.
Thank you.
In the next hour, the gentleman who wants to be mayor, who will be mayor of Washington, D.C., Busboys and Poets, visionary owner Andy Shalal on the Rock Newman Show, right after these messages.